to motivate themselves and others, and people have to conceive ideas and so on. So I guess at some level, something was I never had the idea that I'd write anything, but something was sort of percolating. And then when I was leaving Morgan, I knew I wanted to do, I don't know, we could say philanthropic, where I wanted to do more directly helping work. I think companies serve the common good, but what we did at J.P. Morgan, to me, it's not exactly helping the same way that a nurse with a sick person. There's kind of something, there's a gap there. So I wanted to do something along those lines, but not only that. And I kind of imagined what might I like to do, and eventually I just sort of had the idea, maybe it would be fun to write a book about the Jesuits from a leadership perspective. And I didn't think about it any more seriously than what I just said. Maybe it'd be fun. I've been kind of working for the man for 17 years, and showing up and going home and all this stuff, and this would be a very, very different kind of thing. So I say, all right, I'll try that. And so now, how did I come on the ideas? I had and I'm trying to think actually how I went about this. I think that the first part probably came from the Jesuits. As I thought about the Jesuits and what I thought made them successful, I immediately had a couple of ideas. The idea of, I might not have had the words, but the idea of something like a loving environment, that I had right away, and the idea of something like, I didn't have a word like heroism, but something like, to have some sense of goals bigger than oneself, bigger than one's own ego. I kind of had that idea. There are two other ideas in the book: to be ingenious, to be able to adapt, to be free. That came fairly quickly, and then self-awareness was probably the first. That is a Jesuit hallmark. People in training spend a lot of time thinking deeply about who they are and what life ought to be about. So, so the first thing was, maybe I kind of was imagining the organization and what kind of how could I organize it around qualities. I had stories. I knew I had stories that I thought would really be interesting to tell, of people who were very effective, and words came along with those. Those words I just mentioned. Maybe I had a longer list at first. Other things would kind of come to my mind, and eventually I said, okay, this is what we'll go with. And then I probably went back and forth in a couple of ways. Like, in other words, so the first thing I would do was try to test like an idea like self-awareness. I've worked in a company, and I don't really know the academic literature about management, but I know a little bit. So can I back from my hunch into what was life at J.P. Morgan actually like? Does that bear out? Would it make sense? And what do we know from the research that might also, and when I say the research, I wasn't researching in the sense of let me see where the preponderance of evidence clearly indicates, rather what sometimes in religious terms people call proof texting. Like, in other words, I have an idea that I think I see in Jesuit history. It's kind of true in my own experience, and let me see if there are some things that from people I respect in the academic management field, who are also saying similar kind of things, right? And then also I felt then finally I have to connect this to the Jesuits' own tradition. A lot of people would know that every Jesuit goes through the spiritual exercises. St. Ignatius, if they're done their purest way, 30-day program of meditations where people think about themselves and their path in life, and that's really the foundation of Jesuit spirituality and living, with no doubt. And then Jesuits have to do it again every year for a week. So I guess I felt, all right, any idea that I come up with, I'm going to have to somehow be able to trace back to that source as well. So that's sort of a complicated, maybe, explanation, but it's kind of true. You know, that's the way I guess I went about it. You know, from one, then testing, I don't know, my own experience, dipping the research, and going back to the Jesuit source material.